the concept that you're trying to explain using classical ways, but always get to an intersection where things don't really match, and then you would have to lean on faith and let go of science, or choose one or the other. What was Ruben was describing right now, but it is quite refreshing to see that. So you found it interesting. You found it. That's good. That's good. That's good. Okay, let me get that file here. Where is that? Vayigash. Let me get it down. Daniel said he's coming soon. Good to see that. Who gets to be a king? It's like, who wants to be a millionaire?
Let's say this. Paul showed abilities of leadership.
Absolutely.
Even more than any other brothers. So it had to be between these two.
Right. It is between these two at the beginning, and then their descendants, and then of course Judah prevails, which is what we're going to touch upon.
Rabbi, this is for you.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you, Marty.
Hardly that.
No, it is.
You would say that the stories of the desert suggest that Levi was in the running.
Moshe descends from Levi, all right. So it would surely be entitled, if you know what I mean, to have that.
I saw one unusual opinion a few days ago saying, of course the Maccabees did wrong in taking leadership, but the Maccabees in fact would descend from Yehuda too. Through the wife of Aaron.
Of Aaron.
Yes.
Okay, so you're looking for Marty. You're looking for something. You found. Oh, it's just looking at something. Okay. So a guy walks into a pet shop. I always remember my first visit to China, where I mistakenly thought of a pet shop of a restaurant as a pet shop. If you could understand without.
Like calling Death Row a hotel.
Yeah, well, for a first visit, I remember I visited Shenzhen, and it wasn't my first visit, but one of my first visits to China. But I mistakenly thought a restaurant to a pet shop because there were cages outside. What I'm used to see in Israel, bunnies and rabbits, but it was. Anyway, this is a real pet shop. So the guy walks in, he wants to buy a parrot. So, the salesman says to him, I got this parrot. He speaks Hebrew and English, and, it's great. He says, you got something else? He says, yeah, I got this one. He could count from 1 to 10, and then from 10 to 1. And he could tell you some jokes. And then he goes on to the next one. I got this one from Africa. It's this. And then he sees standing a little bit on the far side of the store. And he says, what about this one? What could this do? He says, this one cannot do anything. He says, so why is he so special? He says, because everybody calls him the boss. The boss. He's got presence. This parrot's got presence. He can't do anything. But, always with a group of people, you have people who stick out through their talents, and you have people who stick out through their leadership, which is also a very distinguished talent. It's not easy to be a director. It's not easy to be a manager. Many people who work simple jobs, so to speak, always have a dream of being executives, but not everybody is equipped with the same level of patience, diligence, meticulous, right? When you want to manage people, that's very, very difficult. That's very different than managing numbers or running charts or even writing a code, right? So managing people is a talent, and we want to look a little bit at what Ruben was talking about earlier about the kingship, the kingdom, and the leadership within the Jewish people. So we are looking at towards the end of the book of Genesis, and this is when Jacob, next week we're going to read how he calls everybody to his bedside, and he's going to give each one a blessing that's unique and special for them. And what he says to Judah is something quite interesting. So we're saying we're going to focus a little bit today about leadership, what it means, what is it made of, and who really gets to have. What is this? Oh, my start. Sorry. Uh, okay. So here's what leadership roles in the Jewish people traditionally. We have the state leadership in Israel. This is a monarch, a king, and we'll soon see how there was two dynasties of kings that were in parallel to each other, and one prevailed.
No, there is one missing, and I consider it important. The princes of the tribes.
Okay. You're right. Well, the princes of the tribes shared leadership. We're talking about how it all comes down to the head of the pyramid. I agree. Princes of the tribes are leaders to the very extent that
they are not top leaders.
yeah. So we had on one hand the state leadership in Israel, the government in Israel, or whatever autonomy, or whatever, this is when Israel was a sovereign place during the times of the king. We have different generations, or perhaps similar generations, leading the diaspora, what we call in Hebrew Rosh HaGolah, or Reisha Devei Galuta, which is in Aramaic. Hey, we just started. So you can have some cake, Daniel. You have to have cake. If you don't. Correct. So
the office is supposed to still exist in some sense?
in some sense, because I guess diaspora is so broad, and it really isn't concentrated under one authority. But back then, they were having kind of a settlement outside of Israel, and that was the diaspora. And there was a leader of this diaspora. There are various stories in the time of the Persian king, Bostanai, I forgot what's the name, right? There was someone.
Even after the Persians got defeated by the Arabs, even times of the Arabs also.
They held on to that
in
position.
In some ways, at least at the beginning, it was even better for Rosh Galut than the Arabs, because the Arabs had particular appreciation the fact that it was a son of David. While that was not a big deal for the Persians, it was apparently a big deal for the Arabs.
Okay, I didn't know that. I knew that they still held on to that position while the Arabs were in power. And we have the spiritual leadership, the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court. This is judicial. This is legislator, right? The legislation of Jewish laws. And that's pretty much leadership roles that are possible in our Jewish nation. And in fact, our sages learned from one verse from the weekly portion: the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the student of the law from between his feet until Shiloh comes, which is a reference to Mashiach, Messiah, and to him will be a gathering of people. From this, the sages learn that all three positions we just counted are actually under the responsibility of the tribe of Judah. So this is what the Talmud says. As it is taught in Baraita, the verse states, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the rule staff between his feet until Shiloh comes. The term Shiloh is understood as the reference for or to.
Rule staff in this translation, as original the few seconds before, it was something of students.
Yeah. Right. Staff and student. Right. You know how it is. Every translation has a little different, and probably the secret is somewhere in between. So therefore, it's understood at the time reference to Mashiach. Therefore, the verse is interpreted as delineating the authority of the Jewish rulers during the exile, before the Mashiach comes. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. These are the exilarchs in Babylonia, Rosh HaGalut, who are empowered by the government and consequently subjugate the Jewish people as with a scepter. It's not real. Nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. These are the grandchildren of Hillel the elder, who hold the position of Nasi and teach Torah in public, but do not have authority to actually enforce their judgment. So the Gemara studies from that it all descends from the same place. We're going to see how exactly it comes from the tribe of Judah. We know Hillel is related to the tribe of Judah. And the question we have with regards to this is, why? Why does Judah become the most powerful of all brothers? Why all leadership concentrates and comes and stems from Judah? and specifically in light of what we see here in the weekly portion, that it is the Joseph, the other brother, who is in power, and all the other brothers are coming to him. He's the king of Egypt. He saves the world. He saves the universe. He saves his family. He saves basically everywhere. He saves everyone from famine.
I will pronounce the middle one very well. It's in honor of he was had both leadership and showed humbleness on the outcome of the issue with Tamar.
Correct. We're going to see reference to that as well. So apparently everything that Judah did, Joseph did even better. Starting by our description of Judah. Oh, here, Rick is asking. I left my phone because I knew somebody will be asking, so I'll tell him. Yes, we are here waiting for you. Okay. Sent. So Judah gets praises from his father for saving Joseph. But in fact, if we look closely in the story, it wasn't much of a saving. They wanted to kill him, and Judah said, let's not kill him, let's sell him as a slave to Egypt. Which is not really, it's better than killing for sure. Yeah, but he wasn't sending him to a vacation in Hawaii or anything like that, right? Also, the story of Tamar, as Reuben was quoting, he did what he did with Tamar, and then at the face of being, she was destined to be, she was almost going to get executed for betraying, for committing something immoral, and then she sends him the signs, the special signs, and he says, oh, you're right, it is me, it's my fault, and then he decides not to do that, right? So that's of course a greatness to admit that someone had sinned, to admit your sin and to face the consequences, but Joseph did not sin to begin with. Remember, we were reading the story last week and the week before about the seduction, the Potiphar's wife seducing Joseph, trying to be with him, and Joseph runs away, even in a price of going to prison for not willing to be with her, not willing to get intimate with her. He felt this is a betrayal of his master. He felt that was something that was not to be done under no circumstances. So Judah gets a lot of credit for what he did, but remember, this is all post-trauma, post-action. This is what Judah admits, but he actually committed what he was accused to be committed, whereas Joseph did not commit any sin. He managed to run away, even in the price, again, of being sent to prison for 2 years, and even more than that. So, whatever we praise Judah for, we have here, Judah is superior to his brothers, so we have, this is what Jacob describes, Judah, Gu, Yehuda, a cub and a grown lion is Judah. From the prey, my son, you withdrew. And Rashi says, what is my son? From the prey you withdrew. Alita, you withdrew yourself and said, what is the gain if we slay our brother and cover it with blood? Similarly, Judah withdrew from killing Tamar when he confessed, she is right, it is for me. So Judah gets a lot of credit from his father and from all the readers of the Torah for basically stopping something in the very last minute. They were about to kill the brother and he says, don't kill him. He's about to kill Tamar for being not loyal, and he just says, don't kill her, it's all my fault. But here's what, wasn't Joseph better in all these things? This is what Mechilta says in Midrash, our master. This is Rabbi Talfon and his disciples. In what merit did Judah attain the kingdom? So Rabbi Talfon says to his students, you say, by the way, that was one of the various ways of our sages, where it's not only a lecture in the university where people are asking questions and the rabbi or the sage is answering questions. It's quite the contrary. They were asking a difficult question and the rabbi would say, why don't you answer the question? And then if it needs fine-tuning or refinement or correction, then the rabbi or the sage or the scholar is there. But it's not being spoon-fed the information. It's actually trying to get the research side of it and trying to understand things on their own. So he says, you say. So they quote in the merit of saying, what profit is if we kill our brother, etc., by which he saved him from death. So Rabbi Tarfon answers them with a question, does it suffice that this saving atoned for his counsel to sell Joseph and not return him to his father? He says, he rescued his brother from death. But what did he do with the brother? He sent him to slavery. he did not tell his father what happened, right? They made up this whole story about Joseph. You remember the story, Daniel? The story, Joseph, they sold him, and then they told the father that he was eaten by an animal, right? They slaughtered, what was it, a kid, a goat? I don't remember what it was. They slaughtered something, and they immersed his garment in the blood, and they brought it to the father, and they said he was probably eaten by an animal. So with all due respect we have for Judah for stopping the brothers from killing their own brother, but it wasn't really, the highlight of a story. Eventually he was there participating and perhaps even plotting in selling Joseph to the Ishmaelites and following that to the Arabs. So Joseph was, on the other hand, far more successful by not listening to his evil inclination, by stopping himself before things had unfolded to be out of control, right? Judah saw he's going out of control, and then he said, wait, I'm sorry, it's me. Oh, don't do that, right? Joseph was superior to that. He wasn't waiting for things to go out of control. He was in complete control. So why does Judah get all the credit, and specifically why he gets the kingship, which is what we're going to see soon about what leadership concentrates and stem from Judah. So let's look at the reference of where it's coming from. This is Jacob summons his children. This is about the time that he feels that he's going to pass away, and soon we'll see a little bit of math, how he knew he's going to pass away. There's actually numbers of years that his father lived, his grandfather lived, and they all correlate with each other, and we'll soon see how King David received his years. By the way, King David, when he was born, Satan said, this boy does not have any right to exist, and he actually had to borrow, so to speak, years. So there were years reserved for King David. He lived for 70 years. So Jacob calls his children before he dies. How does he know that? How does he know this is done? In fact, his father did the same, Isaac, Yitzchak, before he died. Remember the story with the blessings. He's calling Esav, he's calling Jacob, he's giving them blessing, he's telling Esav to go hunt. And this whole story how Jacob ended up with the blessing and not Esav. But he takes it, right? But Isaac called them one by one, right? First he called Esav, then Jacob came in, he got the blessing, then Esav came in, it's one. But Jacob did not want to do that. So he calls everybody together and he starts giving a whole speech. Our sages explained that he was about to tell them when the world will come to an end, when Mashiach will come, when redemption will be. And as he was about to say that, so the divine presence left him and he wasn't going to articulate that message. And then he realized that indeed from heavens they don't want us to know the date. They don't want us to know the date for two reasons. One is we won't go into despair because it's been quite a few millennia and that hasn't happened and redemption hasn't come yet. And second, we should never take things for granted. We know that it's all dependent on our actions when redemption will come. So he's about to tell them, and eventually he doesn't tell them, and then he turns to each one of his children and gives them a special blessing. But, and here comes the big but, the first three children, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi, do not get a blessing. They actually get retribution. They get retribution for being hasty, for being not cautious, for being not thinking through of situations. Reuben is the one who takes Jacob's bed. We spoke about it briefly on Shabbos. When Jacob had 4 wives total, 2 wives, 2 maidservants, which was also mothers of his children, some of his children. And Rachel was his favorite wife. And when Rachel died, so Jacob took his bed and settled it in Bilhah, which was the maidservant of Rachel. Now Reuben, who was the son of Leah, which was always number 2. Number 1 was Rachel, and number 2 was Leah. So Reuben was the son of Leah, saw Jacob, his father, taking the bed and putting it in number 3. So going from number 1 to number 3, felt that this is impossible, that his mother has to be embarrassed. She was all her life, she was number 2 to Rachel. Now she will be again secondary to a maidservant. So he took Jacob's bed and he put it in Leah's tent, in his mother's tent, right? At least wanting for the final years of their lives to be spent together. And this was considered a very, very serious sin. Again, this is apparently not such a big deal, but him interfering with his father's intimate life, with his father's decisions, is considered a very regretful sin, and he actually regretted for that sin until the day he passed away. And Jacob, when calling the children, he tells Reuben that he's so hasty and he does things without thinking. And he also says to Shimon and Levi about, the story what they did in Shechem, when Shechem ben Hamor, when they kidnapped Dinah, the sister, and they raped her, and they did all kinds of things. The village of Shechem and Simon and Levi decided to teach them a lesson. You remember the whole story, how they taught them a lesson? They said, they came back with Dinah and they said, we want to marry your sister. And because my son, the father came and said, my son loves your sister and we want to marry, he wants to marry. And Simon Levi says, it doesn't go like that. If you want us to marry, if you want our sister to marry you, if you want us to be a part, you have to circumcise yourselves just like we do. And they said, yes, we will circumcise ourselves. And then on the third day, when everyone were very hurtful from the circumcision, it is when Simon and Levi took their swords and went into the village and basically killed everyone and took back their sister. That taught them a lesson. Quite of serious stuff. But anyway, so Jacob do you remember that story, Daniel? Yeah, that's Jewish revenge. That's a big joke. They say, why did they circumcise them before they killed them? It's because when you kill Jews, the world doesn't care. The world says nothing when Jews are dead. Right? That's a little joke, black joke. Anyway, so he's calling his children. Everybody is in the same room, and he starts turning to each other by their order, by their age, the time when they were born. So he turns to Reuben, and he has a little bit not nice things to say to him. And then he says to Shimon, also not so many nice things. Then he turns to Levi, and he says not so many nice things. And then he turns to Judah and he says, oh, Judah, my son, you will be the king. You will be a lion cub, this and that. He gives them all the blessings. And the question is that appropriate? What's going on? So the Abarbanel, which is a very famous commentator, one of the very famous commentator, says that indeed he was trying to basically find who is the one that's entitled, who is the one that's worthy to lead the people, to be a leader. So normally speaking, a father would look at his firstborn as to be the one to continue his tradition, right? Firstborn has different rules. The firstborn has to get double share from the inheritance and a few other things that are related to the firstborn. So the father was going and trying to do what they do, elimination. Looking at this one, nah. Looking at number 2, I don't think so. Number 3, number 4, oh, bingo! We got what we wanted, right? So he was basically taking...
He still did not give the privileges of the firstborn to Yehuda.
He did not. He did not make Judah what he wasn't, but he did recognize within Judah and also helped him fortify what was already there. And those are the qualities. Soon we'll see who Judah was and why his father saw something.
Everybody knows which of the children got the double portion.
Well, Joseph was eventually, split to 2, and obviously everything got 2. Yeah, this goes to a different discussion. There's a kind of a rivalry between Reuben and Joseph. Reuben was the first son of Jacob, but Joseph was the first son of Rachel, which is his beloved wife. And there's seemingly, you're right, there is, Joseph and Reuben have a lot in common. Their lives are parallel to each other and are almost not touching in the same, because they both have a different direction. But yes, Joseph was the one who received a double share. He got the blessing from his father that his 2 children will be counted in the tribes. So instead of 12 tribes, we ended up with 13 tribes. In any event, so what the Abarbanel explains is that the blessings that Jacob did, we spoke about it last year and the year before. Jacob was trying to find and to point at the qualities each one of these his sons had, and he was fortifying, he was stressing, he was bringing it out, empowering it, because he knew that is what is going to lead that son or his son into success in life. So when he went through all these children and he realized what happens is, the blessing that Jacob did, it wasn't about giving them something they did not have. it was about revealing what they already possessed to begin with. So Jacob realized that he has a son, although not number 1, not number 2, not number 3, it was number 4 son, but that number 4 son had a quality that none of the sons had, and it was the quality of leadership. And so we'll see what Jacob saw, or how we could see in the Torah of why he gave that blessing to Judah. So the Abarbanel says that this whole gathering, in fact, was for crowning Judah. The whole, it's kind of a conspiracy, but the whole gathering that Jacob did was for the brothers to see. It wasn't something that he called one by one to his room and say, okay, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that. He wanted everybody to be in the same room. He wanted them to acknowledge that Judah has what it takes to become a king, and not only him as an individual, but everyone that descend from Judah would have that quality, the quality of the kingship that they have. So that's according to the Abarbanel, and we want to get a little bit further into this and see what is really so special about Judah. So let's look at 2 dynasties that we had in history of the Jewish people. One dynasty came from Joseph, Joshua, which is the second leader after Moshe. Moshe passes away, and he basically transfers all of his authority and everything he had. Of course, it's a part of God's command, but he gives over everything to Joshua, which is really a true leader. Joshua comes from the tribe of Ephraim. Ephraim is the son of Joseph. We go further another generation. Saul comes from Benjamin, but Benjamin and Joseph are one unit. They are the sons of Rachel. And we have also the king of Israel in the time of the splitting between the 2 kingship, right? The northern kingdom.
It has always surprised me that Jeroboam's kingship was announced by a prophet. You would expect that should not be done. Not so clear.
And Yerovam, although all the dreadful sins and the bad things that he did, in fact, the Talmud brings, it's a medrash, that Hashem told Yerovam, let us walk together, right? He said, let's walk together in the heavens. So he was considered, on one hand, a very wicked individual. On the other hand, he was very powerful. And he had a lot of authority that was, like you said, as a prophecy, which is the words of God, to appoint him to a king. So that's the dynasty of Joseph. On the other hand, we have the dynasty of Judah. Everybody knows King David, his son King Solomon, his son Rechavam. Again, this is the time when the kingdom of Israel had split to 2 parts, and unfortunately some of it is to be blamed by Rechavam, and some of it to his counterpart Yehovam. None of them is clean from guilt, but at the end, this is what happened. We're talking about a period about 300 years before, basically until the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians. There was a split in the kingdom that was like that, and 350 years or so. So that is when Yechezkel gives a prophecy, which is going to be read this week in the Haftarah. This is where, again, this is in the midst, 2 kingdoms. Think people of Israel, instead of having a united people, there's actually split to 2 parts, and in most cases, there's even not so much peace treaty between, not in most, I'd say, we say the most period was...
We'll have to see year by year. Sometimes there were peace, sometimes there wasn't.
Yeah, sometimes there were peace, sometimes there wasn't. Even if there wasn't direct assault between the 2, it was them soliciting some of the enemies of those, and so on and so forth.
That was one of the worst.
Yeah.
To the end. To the end, that solicitation reached horrible levels.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't much blood spilling between the 2 parties. They still realized they're both Jewish.
But there were times of
yes.
agreement and friendship too.
Yeah, but those were, you could count them on, I would say on one hand, but these are a few cases, point by point. In any event, so this happened, many people don't know Jewish history. They think everything was great, but things weren't great even back then. We didn't start making troubles recently. We're always giving ourselves a hard time. So this is...
Rehavam. Oh, I know he was arrogant.
Yeah.
Let's say not a great leader.
Yeah.
But any other sin apart from that?
No, it wasn't. It doesn't have a direct. There's no direct scenes related to him. I guess most of his conflicts were not between him and God, but between him and his people, but which he couldn't. He did not have what his father had, and of course that contributed to the split in the people. That's at least what the Talmud says. So in the midst of these two dynasties, we have the prophecy of Yechezkel, Ezekiel. We're reading it this week in the portion in the Haftarah. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, And you, son of man, Ben Adam, son of man, take for yourself one stick and write upon it for Judah, and for the children of Israel, his companions. And take one stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel, his companions. And bring them close one to the other into one stick. And they shall be one in your hand. And my servant David shall be king over them, and one shepherd shall be for them all. And they shall walk in my ordinances and observe my statutes and perform them. So Yechezkel gives a very decisive prophecy that between the two dynasties, only one is considered legit, only one will prevail in the eyes of God, which is the Davidic dynasty, which descends, of course, from Judah. Of course, this is also brought about the upcoming redemption, where there will be two Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. According to what the Midrash says, Mashiach ben Yosef will reveal himself first, and he will die in the war of Gog and Magog, which is again far from our comprehension. We could just say it we could utter it in our tongue, but we can't really know what it really means. But Mashiach ben Yosef will be here and will die, and then following that, Mashiach ben David will be the one to come and reveal himself and to be the ultimate leader and king. So this is what I wanted to say about King David. King David, so he had his years given from all the other fathers. Isaac lived 180 years. Abraham lived 175. That means 5 less than his son. Where would the 5 go? He gave those 5 years. He put it in reserve. Those 5 years were waiting. Jacob, who was supposed to live like his grandfather, Isaac was there 180, and Abraham lowered the bar, so 175 was the bar. But he lived only 147, so 28 years went to David. Joseph, who was related to his father, again there was 147, and he had 110 years. He gave 37 years to David. So in fact, most of David's life, believe it or not, comes from Joseph. Again, there's two dynasties. Joseph is on the other side, and David is descending from Judah. And nevertheless, you can see most of David's life are coming from Joseph. So, if that's the case, why is it that the Davidic dynasty, the descendants of Judah, were the ones to prevail? So, we're having now elections here in Taiwan. And I don't know if you know, but from tomorrow, I read it last night actually, from tomorrow, they're not supposed to publish any polls. They're not supposed to advertise any polls they're making. You know how it is, they go in the street and they say, according to recent polls, President Tsai has 60% and Mr. Han only 40%. So from January 1st, they can't have, because that actually influences. People say, what am I going to vote? He's going to lose anywhere, she's going to win anyway, or so on, or she's going to lose, and so on. So they have this. I wish they had it in Israel, because in Israel, even the day of the elections, there's still people, they're going to win, you have to vote to us.
People vote, and then...
And the polls, they lie.
No, and then they organize in the Knesset, and the result in the Knesset might be different from people voting. And that's fact. It's not that way.
Yeah, well, that's a little an accusation here. I don't know.
No accusation. It's a must think hard about it.
What do you mean? They vote and then they
vote for representatives in the Knesset, essentially.
Right. Okay. And then
the representatives are elected to Knesset. Then they decide what they do.
That's what you meant. Oh, I thought you meant that their votes are not honored. Oh,
cheating.
okay.
The system is a little indirect.
Yeah, a lot in there, right? So, in the United States a few years ago, they were trying to find what is the best method to realize if people want to vote to a certain to a certain nominee, a certain person that's running for president. So they came up with a question that's kind of interesting. Which one of the nominees you would like to have coffee with? Which one of the people that's running for elections, you say you have 2 or 3, which one would you like to have coffee with? And they realized that question triggered how people felt comfortable in, with that person. How people felt like they would like to meet with them. They would they don't necessarily consider them the strongest leader and maybe the one that resists all pressures from inside and outside, but they feel comfortable, they can identify with that leader, and that actually works. So they found this reason, this question where they asked, and they could guess, but based on the answers, the answers to this question could really point at where the elections were going. And in fact, if we use that as a reference point, Jacob is explaining the brothers why they actually like Judah a lot. And the Torah tells us, this is what he says, Judah, you, O Judah, your brothers shall praise. Your hands shall be on the nape of your foes. Your father's son shall bow low to you. Remember, who's the one who said that everyone is bowing down to him? That was Joseph. But the father says everyone is bowing down to Judah. And Sforno explains, what is Yeducha? Your brothers will accept you as a king as they admit that you are fit to rule. This is not only a prophecy, this is about reality. Jacob says, everyone understands. It's not only what I see within you, everyone understands within you. Chizkuni goes further and says, to Yehuda, your brother will acknowledge you as leader. We have a play on words here, using Yehuda's name as synonym with the owner's position amongst the brothers. The word Yeducha is equivalent to Yeshabchucha ve'chabducha, which means they will praise you and honor you. This will happen when they see you subduing your enemies. Your hand will be around the neck of your enemies. When this happens, they will prostrate themselves before you. So what happens is that Judah had started to become more popular within his own community, his own society. The brothers realized that there is someone that is entitled for kingship, and they themselves had designated him. It wasn't only the father, but he says, Yoducha, your brothers will acknowledge you. Whereas we know what Joseph was not so popular never in the beginning. Of course, when he saved everyone and everyone thanked him, but till the last moment, if you remember, after Jacob passes away and the brothers are thinking maybe this was one big trick, maybe he just honored us because he wanted to show the father, but now when the father is gone, he would be cruel and vicious to him, and they call and they tell him, our father said, and he of course he denies. Just the mere fact that they're thinking of it, that he might be acting in a way that's contradictory to what he says, means that they don't see him as a complete leader, at least not for...
They saw him always as a little out, and perhaps, just guessing here, the complex way he had to meet them back, instead of openly saying, "I'm your brother, I now have power." No, he made a complicated story, backs and forth. I know, that way he produced a variable repentance out of his brothers, etc., but he also alienated them.
Okay, yeah, they took it to, it's not what he said, it's how they perceived it, perhaps, is what you mean. But in fact, what is it? What is it that Joseph does not have that Judah has? Joseph is basically perfection. Joseph comes from Rachel. Rachel was beautiful. Rachel was loved by her husband Jacob. And, everything works out for Joseph. He's sold as a slave. Within minutes, he runs the house. He's being, he's being seduced, and he holds himself. He's sent to prison. Within seconds, he becomes the manager of the prison. And he goes out of the prison and he gives a whole show to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, "You'll be the king." Everything goes, although his life was not very easy and he went through a lot of hurdles, but he was always, he kept smiling, he kept a good mood, and he kept a positive spirit throughout all lifetime. And when people see someone like Joseph, they say, "I can't identify with Joseph. Everything is going well in his life." But when they see Judah is a person who makes mistakes. And he makes more than one mistake. And he acknowledges his mistakes. He regrets them. He repents over them. He's being constantly reminded of his mistake. And the brothers and everyone else says, "You know what? That's someone I could relate to. Joseph, he's up there. He's perfect. He's got everything right. Everything is going out well for him. Judah, no, Judah is one of ours. Judah, as you said, he wasn't alienated. Judah is one of ours. He made mistakes. Everyone understands his mistakes. In fact, his mistakes are his trademarks. That is his professional secret. Because he's imperfect. Because he's down there and then goes up. Because he has, like everyone else, not specifically starting points that are different. He started like everyone else. And he slowly, gradually excelled himself. He gradually made it to where he was. That is very much appreciated by his father, Jacob, and also by the other brothers. And that is why they give praise to him. Chassidut takes that, what we were talking about, and brings it to our world. Okay, we're talking about Judah. Joseph, you came in just on time. Judah, Joseph, beautiful stories of the Bible. What does this all mean to us? And
You didn't get to say my speech?
ah,
You see the speech I sent you?
the speech you sent me about what?
You were waiting for me, and I said, now I feel like the guest of honor.
Oh, you are. Oh, here I see it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let us contemplate wisdom. Okay. Yeah. Where did you start your speech? Like Joseph started his speech. Joseph started his speech with "I have a dream." You think Martin Luther King took it from? He had to take it from somewhere. That was Joseph. Why don't you have some cake, Rick? There's cake here waiting for you.
Also Chinese.
Okay, you'll take Chinese later. Okay. So Chassidut takes this to a level how it can actually reflect us and what is it relating to our own personal lives. So we'll start with a story. There's a professor in Israel called Yirmiyahu Branover, and he is a scientist in hydrodynamics. He's a very, very talented individual. Was born in the Soviet Union. Was born actually in Latvia, and he went through a lot of hardships, like many of the Jews. Hey, I'm sorry, we started at 7. It's our
I
fault.
was out here watching a football game on his cell phone. I told them they'll find him frozen in place tomorrow.
Really? Was it a football game? Who against who?
San Francisco against Seattle.
Who won?
I don't know. It was the last 5 minutes of the game. It went on for like 20 minutes. I finally said, I forget it. I just couldn't come inside.
You know who won? You did, because you came in. It reminds me of a story. There's a rabbi in Israel. I forgot his name. It wasn't Rabbi Zonah, a rabbi in Jerusalem, and he was giving a class to young people, young Israelis. And one of them said to him, "Rabbi, I can't come next week." And he said, "Why?" He said, "Well, there's a big match. Soccer in Israel. Soccer is the." He says, "There's a big match of soccer, but I'll come the week after." So he says to him, "Why don't you come next week as well?" He says, "I just told you, there's a big game of soccer. I can't come next week, but I'll come the week after." So he says, "What is this game about?" So he's telling him about the ball, and everybody's running after the ball, and he says they have to score. They have to score the ball into the goal. So the rabbi says, "How big is the ball?" So he says, "About this size." He says, how wide is the goal?" So I don't know what the number is. How wide is the goal? You know how wide is the goal in soccer? It's big. A few meters. 5 meters, 4 meters. I don't know. So the rabbi says, what's the big deal? There's the ball is so small. She says, "Oh, Rabbi, there's a goalkeeper, and you can't just walk into the goal and score. There's a goalkeeper." And he says, "Does the goalkeeper stay there all the time?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "He doesn't have a wife and children?" He says, "Yeah, he goes after." So he says, "So wait till the goalkeeper leaves, and then you could score. That's very easy." He says, "Well, Rabbi, the whole game is when the goalkeeper is there, and then you need to score." So he says, "So I'm coming back to you." He says, "So why are you saying you're going to come next week, in 2 weeks, but next week you're not coming?" He says, "The whole idea is that you're missing out on something to come to the Torah class. It's like saying, I'll score the goal when the goalkeeper leaves." He says, "What's the game? There's no game. There's not fun, right? There's no challenge."
You must be present to win.
Of course you're going to win, right? It's the whole thing. When the goalkeeper is there and there's other players that are preventing you from going, and then you score, this is when there's a game, right? So you should come next week too.
I just heard another Jewish soccer story a few days ago.
Oh, really?
I don't think there was any parable or
Oh, I don't know.
it was a rabbi says he's asking about soccer, and the student is explaining to him, how you play, and he says, I have a better idea. You just let one team score, and then you let the other team score, and then everybody scores, and everybody's happy.
Yeah. There's a rabbi, not politician. This guy. Okay, you don't get it. That what is it? It's not that he's happy about that. I'm not happy that I lost. I'm not happy because he won. That, you know how it is, right? I lost. But he won. That's even worse. Anyway. So Professor Banov, born in Latvia, went through hardships in childhood. He was diagnosed as a prodigy in a very early age, and he's very big in physics, math, and I said hydrodynamics. And he couldn't go into academics because of being Jewish, and all these things actually made his Jewish identity even stronger because he was stopped from going to places and being with people because of being Jewish. That made him realize, they don't like me because I'm different. I might as well do something about it. So he started growing a beard, and he started, no, not because he lost his shaver, because he believed in it. I know sometimes you lose your shaver. No, he believed in it. It's not like the goalkeeper is not there, and for years, and because he was such a bright person and a scientist, and he wrote a lot of books also, many researches, and so he was eventually well respected by people because although he had a beard and he was Jewish, but still was very smart, and he was considered like kind of an ambassador of the Jewish people within the Soviet Union. And from time to time, they used to call him to lecture in places. One time, he was invited to a lecture, more not like a lecture, more like a symposium. And he kind of woke up a little late in the morning, and he didn't have time to pray. So he realized, I'll go to the lecture, and when there's going to be a 30, 40 minutes break, I'll go back to my hotel room and pray. But unfortunately, things had lasted longer, and people had very interesting questions, and he had to lecture and lecture and lecture. And he was looking behind him, in front of him, he saw the sun is about to set. And he said, what am I going to do? He thought to himself, what am I going to do? On one hand, I'm Jewish, and I'm proudly Jewish, and everybody knows I'm Jewish, and I'm here representing the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. So, okay, so I'll miss prayer, I'll miss tefillin. It's not such a big deal. But on the other hand, he couldn't let himself go over that. So he started coughing while he was lecturing. He started coughing, and everything. Are you okay? Take some water, take some this. And he said, no, I think I'm losing my voice. I need a little bit of rest. And he hailed a taxi, and he got very quickly to the hotel. And as the sun was about to set, he managed to put his tefillin and say a short prayer, the shortest prayer he ever said. And he managed to. And then after that, he thought to himself, what was going on? There's something here that's going on. Okay, there's one hand, there's the lecture, and then there's the Jewish thing, and there's the faith and all that. But on the other hand, when it comes to face of practicality, there's one that prevails the other, which is the practical sense of things is actually more important. He felt like it was more important. He felt he couldn't miss a day. Yeah, he was very busy doing positive things for the Jewish nation, but he couldn't miss a day of not being practical, not doing the practical thing in life. And the question was, well, of course, was he right? Was he wrong? What is more important, to study or to do? And you should know that's not this question asked here and now. It could be, but this is a question that our sages were contemplating for years and years. The Talmud has Gadol Talmud, Gadol Maaseh is study greater, is action greater, and then they ended up coming up to a certain type of compromise where they say Gadol Talmud Shemevir Lidei Maaseh. Study is greater because study brings you to action. So if that's the case, then that means action is better than study, because what's the greatness of study? That it leads you to act, right? The study, so eventually, which is greater, right? They say study is greater because it leads you to action. One of the interpretations is that you gain the two at one, but still there's always that debate, to do or to study, right? On one hand, you think and you contemplate, you strengthen your connection with God, you enhance it. But on the other hand, in the face of doing things, which is more important and which prevails, which is superior and which is inferior? So, in fact, this, if you would like, is the ultimate conflict between Joseph and Judah. Joseph was a man of thought. He was a visionary. He was a dreamer. He was a person that had everything in his mind. He knew what it's going to be and how it's going to be, and he got everything worked out. Judah was a hard labor. He did things on his own. He made mistakes, plenty of mistakes recorded. By the way, that's one of the beauty. A lot of people acknowledge that, specifically non-Jews, the authenticity of the Tanakh, of the Bible, and, the whole Jewish theology is that there's no cover-up. Our patriarchs, when they made mistakes, those mistakes are written. It's written and it's bold, and you could see that. And that helps you see, a lot of people in other religions or in other theologies, they like to treat their heroes and their patriarchs, they were perfect. No mistakes, no issues, no problems. Doing this, miracles, wonders, everything is going great. Speaking to God, the Son of God, I don't know, whatever they make up with, and they're happy with that. Whereas in our, Abraham, mistakes, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Judah, everybody's right, King David, everybody's got an issue, right? Nobody's completely innocent. That's the beauty of it, because that helps us to understand that it relates to, we can relate to that. We could understand that. We could say, okay, if the book was about perfect people, I would close the book and say, this is a nice fairy tale, but this is not real life. Welcome to the real world. In the real world, people have lusts and desires. People sometimes are tired and hungry. People are sometimes disoriented, and they're not noticing, and they can't pay attention, and maybe they're not in the mood and not in the spirit and lacking the education and the knowledge. And we're not really there. So what are we going to do? Open up the book. You see? Well, you know what? It happened. It happened in the past. What did they do, our patriarchs, our matriarchs? They came to terms with it. They faced their problems. They corrected them. They tried their best to fix everything, right? They didn't just say everything is good, everything is swept under the carpet. You say that in English?
That's what I told you before. That's why we came up with psychoanalysis.
Yeah. In later generations, right? That was the foundation to that. Anyway, so Joseph is a man of wisdom. So we look at the two, Torah study, Joseph is there, mitzvot action, Judah is more there. So, in fact, Judah stayed a man of action. And here comes the reference for Levi, by the way, when Jacob had to appoint someone as the head of the yeshiva, the head of the scholarly school, that was Levi. Rambam Maimonides stresses that, and he says it wasn't Judah, it was Levi that was there. So in fact, the tension between the two, Judah and Joseph, was not just the tension between two brothers who might not, be happy with each other. It is the conflict between the two approaches, which is preferred, to study or to do. Which is more important? Which is something that you are more to do with? And in fact, we have the answer that's brought. We were quoting the prophecy from Ezekiel, which is Judah. Judah is the one to prevail. Judah is the one to be superior. Judah is the one that all kings descend from. And the reason for that is simple. A person who is more obsessed with study, and as important as study may be, so a person who studies Torah, who learns, eventually that leads him to satisfaction. A person who studies and is successful in their studies, right? If someone doesn't succeed in their studies, that's one thing. But a person who studies, and eventually it's also good for him. And it gives him that pleasure, that delight. And you could see many people who are scholarly, not necessarily theology, Jewish religion, or anything related. People who enjoy study, there's still a lot of people out there in the world. Not everybody enjoys playing stupid video games and burning their brain cells.
Working hard to make sure that people.
Right. It's like the 3%.
The ability to concentrate and learn.
Right. Otherwise, they'll steal, right? You'll take I was hearing a lecture, a TED over it just the other day about 3% versus 97%, where the 3% are making sure none of the 97% gets to there, because you need millions of people playing Xbox. You need a few people making it up, right? Inventing it and writing the code. Otherwise, it's not lucrative, right? They're not playing Xbox, I can tell you. They're doing better things in their time, right? I'm sorry if you play. I don't, but I could have. I just don't. But anyway, so when you study, when you learn Torah, you feel good about it. But the actions not necessarily makes you feel good all the time. Sometimes, and in many cases, it's not like that. So in fact, the idea is that you're giving up on something. If you only do what you're good for, or what you're good at, or what makes you feel good, then if one day it doesn't make you feel so good, or you're not happy with this, you'll stop doing it. But if you train yourself to do things because those things need to be done, regardless of whether I have emotions in there, regardless of whether I feel good about it, but I know this is what needs to be done, consider it as a soldier. The most simplest of soldiers is always there. He's always on the front. And those are the people in the front line. The people like Judah are in the front line. And Jacob acknowledges it and tells the brothers, you should know there's a son, a brother here that is on the front line. He does things even when they're not convenient, not comfortable. He makes a mistake. The easiest thing for him is to say, I never made a mistake. Just pretend like that never happened. Bribe someone, make sure that doesn't, kill another person. On the other hand, he's there. And when things go wrong, he faces it and he faces the consequences. And it doesn't happen once, not twice, several times. And it's not only Judah, it's those who descend from him. We said the kingship, the dynasty comes from Judah. King David, we all know. King Solomon, we all know. All the dynasty that comes in, even Rehoboam for that matter, he did acknowledge his mistake. It was too little too late for him because the split was already made and Rehoboam was gaining popularity. And of course, this was, even if he was up to bringing unity, which I don't know if is recorded in the Tanakh, was he having efforts to bring unity to the kingdom, Rehoboam?
At least in that generation, if there was such effort, which it failed.
Even if it was already too little too late. Not always, those things are there, but still, actual knowing that this is something that can be done, it can be achieved, is really delightful and helps us understand that it is the people of action. Those are the people that we should rely on. People of study, they're great, they're wonderful, but at the end of the day, those who would take us forward and those who would bring us to the era of redemption are the people of action.
I remember a story saying that Yerovam was told that it was okay that he will be king, but he will have to acknowledge that Rehoboam was ahead of him.
That he will be under. There will be under Rehoboam. And he was not accepting of that. Yeah. So you see, maybe Rehoboam would have get that because the people of action are not necessarily those who wish to see themselves at the top. King David, as the king, he was not just a king; he was a poet and he was a warrior. King David, the kings normally would send their military and they would stay in their throne in the palace, and give me some fan, give me some air and some grapes to eat and some watermelon. King David was the first one. He was going before his soldiers. He was on front line. That was when he... Moshe Dayan was great, but King David was slightly, and in parallel to that, King David, after making a mistake and regretting for the mistake, he actually got to a level that he killed his evil inclination, so to speak. He was able to get to perfection from imperfection, right? He got what was... so I want to tell you that lecture I was in, that little TED talk. So they were saying this guy, a very bright guy from Netherlands, I think. So he's of course a part of the 3%, right? He was talking to. His lecture was, how do you turn from 97? How do you get from this side to that side? So he's talking about innovation. So he was saying something that I caught a lot. He says about the London taxi drivers. I don't know, by the way, if you've been to London, taking a taxi in London is ridiculously expensive. But anyway, right? Danny, you've been to? Yeah, it's just nobody. Anyway, it turns out there's a lot of people that do take taxi. So they were saying that, I don't know, many years ago, to get a license to drive a taxi in London, you have to know all the streets, everything by heart. Right, this is pre-GPS time, pre-satellite, right? You have to know, somebody hails a taxi, a cab in one side of the town and he wants to get, you need to know how to take them. So slowly, when population had increased and, more streets, more people, they realized they don't have enough trained drivers and there's a great shortage of taxi cab drivers in London. So this smart guy came up with the idea. He said, okay, we can't train too many people to know, because you really have to be talented to know the whole city map by heart. right? Says enough. We have the older people who are trying to catch up with all the newer things, but training, and we need quickly to train more people to drive taxis in London. So they came up with the idea, and they said, I don't know if this is a real story. I just heard it a few days ago. It might be complete made up of this Dutch guy, but he says that they recruited a lot of drivers, and they decided to put on their taxi a sticker which says like this: the driver in this taxi does not know all the streets, but he will be very happy to receive instructions from you. So he said a lot of the tourists, a lot of the people who don't know what they were doing, they were looking for the regular taxis. Well, the other taxis, they were actually going like hot buns, because a lot of the people who live in London, they know very well the streets. They just don't drive for different reasons. So they were getting, they were bossing them around throughout the whole journey. So they were looking for those taxis. Hey, turn left, turn right, 3 streets on the right, take a U-turn there. And that makes you from a passive situation to an active role. And people were looking for those taxis. Anyway, he says how they thought outside the box, and how people who had the imperfection of not knowing the streets were actually the most wanted taxi drivers, because a lot of people who were happy to tell them and to share with them the instructions how to go and what to do, and that made it to like a private driver type of thing, right? A lot of experience people don't necessarily experience in their daily lives. And it's just, anyway. So in any event, what the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, he would say, right, this is Pirkei Avot, chapter 3, one whose wisdom is greater than his deeds. What is he comparable to? To a tree with many branches and a few roots. Comes a storm and uproots it and turns it on its face. As he stated, he shall be as a lone tree in the wasteland. It shall not see, when good comes, he shall dwell parched in the desert, the salt land uninhabited. But one whose deeds are greater than his wisdom. You hear that? Deeds are greater than, you don't have to be the wisest person on earth. But deeds, action, the deeds are greater than his wisdom. To what is he compared? To a tree with many roots and few branches, whom all the storms in the world cannot budge from its place. That is stated, he shall be as a tree planted upon water, who spreads his root by the river, who fears not when comes heat, whose leaf is ever lush, whose worries not in a year of drought, and ceases not to yield fruit. Maybe not many fruits, because there's not many branches, not many flowers. There are fruits, and there's going to be continuity and sustainability with such a tree. So Jacob acknowledging Judah having this, maybe less wisdom, more action. He says he is going to be the king. Prophet acknowledges it, Ezekiel acknowledges it, and this was the dynasty. We're waiting for the coming of Mashiach ben David, redemption that will come from, it descends from Judah, from King David. And indeed, this is what we could derive, we could understand from the story of Judah as Joseph. So it wasn't just a rivalry between two brothers, it was two different thinkings, two different approaches to life. And Jacob makes the choice and says, this is what we want. We want more doers. We got enough thinkers. We need more doers. We need more people who could really step, like they say, boots on ground. Be there and do the things that need to be done. And those are the people that would bring us to the ultimate redemption, which we all are waiting for. Okay, any questions about this interesting topic? We're done, can I eat? Okay, that is a legal question. Yeah, the answer is yes. Anything a little more related to, are we done, can I eat? I like that. That's being practical, by the way.
The first 40 minutes, can you summarize?
The first 40 minutes, we were, you know how it is, the ending is more important than the beginning. We were giving a slight review of the difference between Judah and Joseph. We were saying that at the end, everybody descends from Judah, to both the spiritual leadership and the monarchy in Israel. Those, of course, there were two kingships, but eventually the monarchy is the one that survives, is the one from Judah. And of course, everybody's looking for the other 10 tribes, right? You know the story, the 10 tribes, 2 tribes, 10 tribes, 2 tribes are Judah, 10 tribes are all gone. We don't know where they are. Somebody said that they might be the Chinese, which we won't be so reluctant to get 1.5 billion Jews all of a sudden. That could change slightly the ratio. That would make you think twice if you want to be an anti-Semite. you know, Xi
One would
Jinping.
claim it's the American Indians.
The American Indians are
That's what
the
one
10
would
tribes.
claim.
There aren't too many of those, aren't they? Would they put them in Indiana now? Would they?
American Indians?
Yeah,
Well, yeah, those that have survived during
yeah,
various places.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait, they were killed in masses, weren't they? By
About 97%.
97%.
Yeah, 97,
Wow.
98%. Yeah.
Wow.
Most of that was through disease, though.
Oh, not actively.
Not actively, but it was from, disease that came over. But no, a lot of other lives was active.
Yeah.
A few tribes were worked to death, essentially.